Message from outer space to the viewers of this video. Please enjoy our coverage of the 2022 Exeter UFO Festival. The views expressed in this program are those of the speakers. They do not reflect the views of Exeter TV, the Town of Exeter, or the Select Board. To learn more about the festival, visit exeterufofestival.org. Start video countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Blast off.
Mike is a seasoned paranormal researcher and investigator. He has worked to change the stigma surrounding the abduction phenomena by promoting public awareness of the subject and by encouraging and supporting other experiencers. He was the initiating force behind the New Hampshire historical marker for Betty and Barney Hill's UFO encounter. Mike has been interviewed in the past by newspapers, television, and radio about his involvement in the paranormal and the UFO communities locally as well as internationally. Mike has become a trusted source for New Hampshire UFO history. He is also the subject of Maine author Nomar Slavik's wonderful book, Granite Skies, which documents most of Mike's experiences. Mike's experiences started at about the age of 3 and have been ongoing ever since. The experiences have come in a variety of forms and demeanors. Dealing with his own experiences has led him to help other experiencers overcome their trauma as well as his own. Matthew Moniz is a scientist who for the last 30 years has worked in the fields of analytical chemistry, molecular biology, and genetic engineering in labs in the greater Boston area and Cambridge as well. And he has worked on analyzing samples from many famous UFO, crop formation, and paranormal cases over the last couple of decades. He has been the co-host, science advisor for the great radio show Spooky South Coast for the past 17 years. He is also one of the oddballs from the great live TV show 30 Odd Minutes, as well as co-host of Inner Space TV with Tom Reed. Featured in many TV shows and about UFOs, ghosts, and other unexplained phenomena. He has been a guest on Inside Edition and Ghost Adventurers, among others. Moniz has been featured in dozens of books dealing with the unexplained by authors such as Bud Hopkins, myself, Tim Weisberg, Jeff Belanger, among others. For the past 20 years, he has also worked as a sound engineer and run the audiovisual for many conferences, and now is the official AV engineer for all UFO events for the Greater Roswell Convention Series. Debbie Hewins and her identical twin sister Audrey are lifetime experiencers. They have been having encounters with ETs and other non-human entities since they were born. In 2006, Debbie and Audrey started Starborn Support, a support group for people who have had encounters with ETs and other non-human entities. Debbie is a psychic medium, a gifted healer, and channeler for ETs and other non-human entities. She is also able to speak telepathically to many of these beings. Additionally, Hewen is also a paranormal investigator and a certified third-degree Reiki master practitioner, therapist, teacher. Debbie has been training in psychic surgery and has an associate's degree in medical assisting. She has been a guest on many television documentaries and shows, including Monsters and Mysteries, Inside Edition, a National Geographic documentary, The Secret History of UFOs, an ABC 2020 special, and a Japanese television program regarding her paranormal encounters. Starborn Support is involved in developing a special project they have been bound not to comment on at this time, but will as soon as they are able and have their partner's permission. Mike, Debbie, Matt, welcome.
All right, the Three Stooges. Are you talking?
Go first.
Yeah, might as well.
Your Granite Sky. Yeah, but your slide's next.
Guess what first?
Hi, I'm Matt. Debbie.
I'm Debbie from Starboard Support.
And I'm Mike Stevens from Granite Sky. All right. Let's see.
You want to stand this side?
Yeah.
So,
All right.
yeah, here you go.
I'd like to talk a little bit about alien abduction. Now, I am an experiencer, or as I still call myself, an abductee, because there is a definitive difference. An abductee is taken against their will. An experiencer tacitly has involvement, and then you have what are called contactees, people that actually seek out and want to be involved. All right. Okay. There we go. Now, with most experiences, people will be taken, there's an interaction, and returned. Sometimes, in our particular case, you get to meet other people as the experience is occurring. And that is how Debbie and I met. We were taken individually from wherever we were at that particular time. We were able to interact with each other, then returned back to our respective places. And then several years later,
About a decade later,
she walked into the bar that I was working at as a sound engineer, and I recognized her twin sister, and her sister came over, sat on my lap and said, "Hey, it's good to see you again." And we recognized each other.
From that experience. And it was funny because my brother's band was playing that night, and while we were talking and recognizing each other, my brother wrote a song called "My UFO is Up on Blocks," and he was playing that song. So can't make this stuff up.
Weird synchronicities happen all the time in paranormal or unexplained. So you got to wonder, are those synchronicities on purpose? Yeah.
I believe they are. Yeah, there's too many. There's too many coincidences.
All right. Who do they take and why? Well, there are just as many different reasons for taking somebody and who takes them and why they take them. Some groups may want to take this particular type of people for this means and ends. Other groups want this particular group for this means and ends. If you go looking through the literature, you can discern what groups are doing what if you were to basically follow what they're saying. It may be that it's all a big smoke screen and there's something totally else going on behind the scenes, or it may be just as it appears. You have better interactions with them than I do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm what you call like a voluntary experiencer. At one point, I was asked by ETs, would you like to be an ambassador or something? There goes my hand, stupidly, not thinking. My life changed in an instant. Bombarded with new gifts, and then we call them downloads or whatever. They opened me. They told me that they were activating my dormant DNA in order for enlightenment, and I would start developing gifts, as they call them, gifts. Well, yeah, these gifts are your psychic abilities, just full blown, just opening up. I'm seeing spirits. I'm hearing, I'm talking to beings in my head, and it's at the point now where I'm in bed and I will get woken up about 3:33. It's usually that time, and I'll hear, "Go outside." And if I ignore it, they will just keep harassing me until I get up and go outside. So lately it's been, I step outside and I look up and I say, where are you at? And there they are. They're just all over the place. They're finally letting me film them. There's all sorts of different crafts that I've seen just in the last week. I've got a few on film, and I've got a couple of the ETs themselves in pictures too, which surprised me. But I've been waiting for a long time. I'm always getting frustrated because they have an ability. If they don't want to be filmed, they're going to shut everything down. They drain batteries, they kill every camera. You can't film them if they don't want to be filmed. And that's what they used to do. And it used to, frustrate the crap out of me. Why don't you let me film them? But finally, they're starting. I don't know what is changing, but they are definitely getting more active, and I think the disclosure is going to happen whether the government officials like it or not. They're coming. They're here, and
they've been here.
Yeah, but they're showing themselves more and more. You're going to hear a lot more and see a lot more videos and pictures of ET crafts.
All right, getting to her point about them manipulating DNA. That's something I do for a living. I work in a biotech during the week, and my job is to help genetically engineer various microbes to produce product X, whatever that product may be. We'll take things like yeast or Corani bacteria, E. coli, take one particular gene out to make it produce, chemical X. So I understand what it means to take a biological organism and play around with their DNA. Now, human DNA contains a lot of what they used to call junk. Turns out that there are latent genes that produce things in the body that we are just now understanding, okay? And there have been a few studies that have shown that experiencers, abductees or whatever, their DNA is slightly different. There are certain commonalities to it. So anybody that comes from somewhere else, if they want to be involved in a biosphere, that's what this Earth is a type of biosphere. In order to be able to utilize the materials here on this planet, first thing you got to do is be able to incorporate those materials into your system. So in order to do that, you take some of the organisms that are there, interlace it with some of your stuff, and then you can produce something that could cohabitate in both environments. I do that, like I said, on a daily basis with simpler organisms, but the principle is still the same. All right. Moving along. Researching the subject, okay? We've been involved with all of the major researchers in the subject for decades. Yeah. And one of the things we've come across when speaking with all of these researchers, we wound up talking more to their other clientele or the other experiencers, and we wind up, it's kind of a big dysfunctional family, but we all watch out for each other and we all understand each other. Very similar to how, combat vets will identify with other combat vets. It's just our battlefield is on a different place, but the trauma and the emotional reactions are still the same. You can choose not to believe it or not to believe us, but the trauma that people experience is real. You can't deny that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can talk about some well-known cases. These are all friends of ours, and we all share, that same, like I said, camaraderie from having gone through this. There are little things that we're able to share with each other that other people may not understand. To us it's funny. About, with, hey, do you remember how they would do this? And, here, let me dispel this other myth. They are not perfect by any means. And when I say they, it's pejorative they, whoever they are. they do make mistakes. And they'll put clothes on backwards, put you somewhere else where
Not
you didn't know. Yeah. Good example. A couple of decades ago, when I was married, I got taken, and then they returned me back to my front deck. My front door was deadbolted. And this is February in Cape Cod, and I'm butt naked. So I'm pounding on the door trying to get my wife to come let me in. She's like, "What are you doing outside?" And I just pointed up, and she goes, "Oh." Okay. Yeah, I mean, how do you deadbolt a door from the outside, and the slider had the bar in it? You know, how do you lock the door when you're naked and your keys are in your jean pocket that's sitting on the bedroom floor? You know, so they do make mistakes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was not happy.
I bet you they were laughing.
They really don't have a sense of humor.
Yeah, they do. Well, they do.
What do they look like? What do they look like? Well, there's many different species or types as there are stars. So a lot of people will talk about particular types. This is a drawing done by a friend of ours,
David Chase. Right?
David Chase, correct. And he took collections of stories from other people and basically made a simple panel of them. There are still many more. Someone estimated from all of the various reports of 70-something different types have been reported. Not to say that there are not more still coming, it's just from the literature, that's what they took. Now, as a scientist, I'm looking at data. Okay, that's what I'm concerned with, is data. But it doesn't mean that a person's story isn't any less valid. Because let's face it, a story told in court has been known to put people to death. Okay? So the power of spoken word should not be underestimated. So what's the evidence? This is where I'm focused, because I'm looking for answers. I'm not looking for answers to be famous. I'm not looking for answers to, solve it for everybody else. I'm here to answer questions for myself that I have. Now, I have a certain special set of skills, as it would say, in science. I work in analytical chemistry and things like that. So I have very powerful pieces of equipment at my disposal. So what I will do is I will collect, soil samples. I've done stuff on Betty's dress years ago and crop circles and stuff like that. Now I can take the substances and whatever, test it, and it gives me answer why. Okay, the instrument is not subjective to, interpretation of what it thinks the story is. It just produces data. Now, the rest of us can argue why, substance Y came out of this, but there is no question that substance is there. Okay, and when whatever that substance may be, is not what should normally be there, like in particular cases of soil samples. And I discussed this last night doing analysis on some of the stuff from bent waters. And okay, we know that these elements and compounds exist. The reason I'm looking at them is I want to see what their ratios are. And when I find ratios that are far different than what should be normally there, that leads me to further questions, how and why. I know what it is. Now the question becomes how and why. Okay. It's not, you don't change molecular structures of, plants and soil and things just by thinking up a story. Okay, that takes physical energy to do. And that can be measured. And it can be measured impartially by instrumentation. Like I said, instrumentation doesn't have imagination and go on flights of fancy. You follow a specific procedure, the instrument produces, results Y. Like I said, then from there we can all argue how it got there and stuff like that, but there's no debating that element Y is there. Okay, dispelling myths. Abductions only happen at night. That's if you want to follow basically the media, because fear sells. There was a couple of different studies, and over 60% of abductions happen during the day. At least at one of the studies I read. Anybody know what the most common thing that a person is doing when they're being abducted? Driving. If you're sleeping while you're driving, there's a whole nother issue. But generally driving is one of the more common ones. Or they're outside in, doing some activity. Yeah, there's a lot of different things, because I also do a lot of ghost hunting. And people think, oh, ghosts are only active at night. No. You're only home at night, okay? Paranormal activity will happen, round the clock. You only observe it when you're home. So, same thing, the media likes to portray it as being a nocturnal event, and they like to tie it to, it's this or that, and it only happens to backwoods people. Nope. I do live out in the woods, but I wouldn't consider myself backwoods. Nobody ever sees it happen. Okay. Various significant others, girlfriends, wives, or whatever that I've had, have seen me been taken. I've been seen on craft with other people, and other people seen me being returned. And I'm not the only one. Linda Cortiel, we'll leave her name. Yeah. And there's been plenty of others. Travis Walton. There are plenty of other cases where a person is being observed, being taken or returned. So
we get taken in groups too.
Yeah.
We get taken. It was my twin sister and Denise Stoner, and I were on the highway on our way to, I believe it was to film for a Japanese TV show, and we were getting ready to take an exit, and I was in the back seat, and I started just not being able to stay awake. I kept nodding. I'm like, what do I have, narcolepsy or something? What's going on? And the next thing you know, we're all panicking because we're way down the highway. We were getting off. We ended up almost an hour late for our own event. That was embarrassing, but we just looked at each other like, wow, we just had an incident there. So yeah, it takes you by surprise. You never know. Driving down the street, and next minute we're late for our own show.
Like I said, driving, one of the most common places people are abducted from. People are always returned. Now, these are rare cases where people have been taken and gone missing or what have you, but there are records of people not coming back, okay, for whatever reason, whether they went willingly and didn't want to come back or something happened and, they're so advanced they would never make a mistake. We've already covered that. If the government knew, they would tell us. Yeah. They can't even tell us about earthly stuff, without lying to you, so never mind anything beyond that. Okay? They are here to help us or harm us. We really don't know. Some are here to help. Some have their own inert agendas, and there may be a handful that, look at us as lunch. I mean, we're trying to put our perspective on something that isn't from here. That's a common thing that humans like to do. We like to ascribe our moralities, our thought processes to other things. We do it with animals, okay? Yeah, how many times have you heard of people going up to a wild animal, oh, let me pet you? Well, how'd that work out for you? You know, like the lady that went to try and pet the buffalo.
Yeah, oh God.
That didn't work out well for her.
Did she end up pantsless or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's been plenty of other people, thinking, oh, I can just go up and, because I'm coming up to it with love in my heart. That lion's looking at you like you're lunch. Okay, so what we project, onto other beings may not necessarily be what they're about. Now, with that caveat said, if they really wanted to do us harm, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Let's face it, we wouldn't be here. Because compared to what they have in terms of ability, we're ants. Mm-hmm. We're literally just, ants. You don't pay any attention to an anthill when you're walking down the trail, do you? So you get enough ants on you, you're going to have a hard time, but for the most part, we're no threat. And if they were a threat, we wouldn't be here. Not to say that there aren't some that may have some sort of malevolent thing, but for the most part, we're dealing with things that either have an interest in our involvement, or just, okay, you're there, you're a resource, I'm doing this, you go about your business, I'm going to go about mine. Okay? And then you have people that they are, insert your religious belief, labeled here. Okay? Not to say that belief systems are either good or bad, but that's what people do. They're demons, or they're angels, and see, a lot of people that go through these experiences color it with the lens that they look through life with. If you were raised highly religious and you were, have that type of background, you're going to see them more like this or in that vein. If you're more analytical, such as myself, I'm looking at what they're doing and trying to piece together the plan. And then there are other people that just plain try and deny it's happening. Yeah. And those are the ones that we wind up trying to help the most. Because, first thing you got to do in order to be able to heal is accept that something's happening. Just like alcoholics. In AA, the first thing you got to do is, admit that you have the problem before you can start to heal, before you can start to basically, the road to recovery. And again, our story. Before I actually met them, when I was younger, a teenager, I was introduced to this other girl in a special room. It was an oval type room, and it had like rectangular and square boxes that started low in the middle of the path and then fanned up and out. It reminded me kind of like a theater, where starting low and moving high, and there was a pathway that went through the middle of it, door on either end. So I got shoved into the room because, like I say, I don't play well. Any chance I get, I wreak havoc. So they just basically shoved me in the room, and on the door on the other side opened up, and they entered in a young teenage girl about my age. She came over to me. We started talking about school, music, typical things that teenage kids would do. She was cute, so I started hitting on her, and she started, anyway. Doors open up.
Men.
Well, they also dressed us in a particular type of outfit. Both of us were wearing the same type of suit, and it had very unique properties. So I was playing with it, and she was playing with mine, and anyway. The doors opened up, they motioned for her to come, and me being Mr. Bravado, I jumped in front of her like, you're gonna have to go through me to take her. And they very rarely speak or impart information to me. And they were like, if you don't let her go, you don't get to go home. At that point, I'm like, here you go. Chivalry right out the window. And they took her up, and we got returned. And then 1991, Bristol Community College, in a UFO lecture by Stanton Friedman on April Fool's Day, I'm sitting in a planetarium. Now, if you know, a planetarium is that same kind of round thing with the seats that go up. On the door on the opposite side opens up, and she walks in. So I immediately just walked right past Stan, right over to her. She dropped her purse and things, and then we just sat down, started talking. Then a couple of weeks later, started dating, and then after that, living together, got married, and then years later got divorced. So I had just finished with the divorce, and then working at the bar, and deja vu all over again, as it would say. Here's another person that I had met back then.
Yeah, not one but two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was dating the owner of the bar, and I'd got my brother a gig. His band was playing there. So my sister and I figured we'd go watch our brother's band and hang out. And I remember sitting there, and the sound guy looked awful familiar, and I was staring at him for a while because I thought I knew where I knew him from, but I didn't want to admit it. So I asked my sister if she recognized him. That's when it was verified that, oh yeah, that's the guy. So as my brother's band's playing, like I said, we walked over to him, and it was like we knew each other all our lives. It was weird. It's like a connection, an instant bond. And my brother's band was playing, my UFO was up on blocks, and we were just comparing and seeing what was going on and comparing stories. And I remember going out on the back deck with you, and we made a promise to each other, we're never going to date, because that's what they want, you know? But I think this is the plan, because we're working together now. If we dated, we wouldn't even be talking to each other by now, right?
Given both our history.
Yes. So I think that was a plan.
Well, that's the other thing. It's not just trying to put together people for genetic reasons. They pair up other people for whatever reason they got, you know. There are a couple of women that were introduced to each other that work on doing things, and that's one of the things I worked with Bud Hopkins with for many years. I dealt with cases where, similar to mine, where they had more than one person involved that remember and were able to acknowledge that, okay, we're working together, we know that this is happening, and stuff like that.
Yeah, we worked with Bud Hopkins. We did separate sessions, so, you know, individuals, we wouldn't influence each other, but that's when it was verified, pretty much.
Yeah. I definitely want to thank you, and we'll let Mike actually do some speaking. Come on.
Ready, Mike? Come on. Get out of the corner, Mike.
All right, well, before I get started here and we switch gears, can we have a big hand for these two? They do amazing work. So as Peter said in his introduction, I'm Mike Stevens. I do like to hide out in the woods. I would much rather be there than in front of all you people. You're all lovely, but it's not really my thing. So when I'm not able to get out there and hide, I run Granite Sky. Granite Sky is very similar to Starborn Sport. We help other experiencers. And what I determine as an experiencer is anybody who's had any type of interaction with a UFO that they have an uncomfortability with. If they have some problem dealing with it, processing it, that to me is an experiencer. And we do this because I've been an experiencer most of my life. My first memory is of an experience Nomar Slevik, who's the main author, wrote a book, and he's got most of them in there. But I'm going to share with you some of the experiences today to show you just a variety of things that go on and why I use the term experiencer as opposed to abductee. There are abduction type parts of it, but there's some stuff that are just so weird and bizarre they don't fit in any category. It's just an experience. So like I said, my first experience that I remember, I was about 3.5 years old, not too far from here in Southampton, New Hampshire. We're at my grandmother's house, and there was some type of family function going on. My aunts, uncles, extended family were all there. The way my grandmother's house was set up, there was a little 3-season sun porch towards the back of the house, right off the dining room. I remember walking by that and getting an instant urge to get outside. I don't remember how I got outside, but I found myself standing in the driveway. My cousin, who's a couple months older than me, was out there already standing there, which the odds of one of us getting out of the house without anybody noticing just isn't there, so never mind both of us. So we were just kind of standing there, not knowing what we were doing, just waiting. And the next thing we know, the woods behind my grandmother's yard started to glow, and this large craft arose above the tree line. From there, it floated over to us, and it parked itself, not parked like on the ground, but hung out in the air next to this tree at the end of the driveway. It had a row of lights around the center of this thing that were strobing in a kind of rolling motion of light whites and soft blue colors. And as we stood there and watched it, we really had the feeling that it was watching us as well. And then the lights changed. It started being more reds and oranges and more aggressive, flashing a lot quicker. When that happened, almost like when you open your car door, some type of interior light came on in this craft, and you could see the shadows of humanoid figures. You couldn't see any details, but only from like the shoulders up and heads. The next thing I remember, this craft was at the other end of the driveway by the road above a telephone pole, and then just shot off into space in the blink of an eye. And that was always my standing memory, trying to fill in that missing gap of what had happened. I always had a feeling something happened, but I didn't know. I didn't actually remember it. So in about my mid-20s, I finally went to hypnosis for it to try to fill in some of that blank. I was still very fearful at this time of the situation. The hypnotist wasn't specialized in abduction cases or experiencers, so I wasn't in really deep enough to cover it all, but we did reveal some things. That I was probably taken aboard, and the first thing I saw on board was only the midsection of some creature that almost had mantis-y or chicken wing type arms. I didn't see a head or feet or anything with it. From there, I was taken into another room. I don't remember if I was on a table or laying down or floating. All I know, I wasn't horizontal anymore. I mean, I was horizontal, not vertical. I could feel the presence of things around me, but I couldn't visualize them, even in the regression. But it seemed that they were trying to distract me while something else was going on during this. But while that was going on too, there was a weird sense of familiarity. I knew who these people were, or I don't know if people's the right word, but we had met before. As regression went a little further, I realized that most of the action seemed to be down by my feet that they were trying to keep me from looking at. And that's when I realized that it was my cousin they were working on down there, and I snapped out of the regression. So me and my cousin growing up, we always just had this surface conversation about, do you remember the UFO we saw when we were kids? And it was, yeah, but whatever, and that was it. So after this, I decided it was probably time to actually have a real conversation about it. So I told her what I remembered and what I had went through, and she's like, I don't remember any of that. What are you talking about? She's like, I believe you, but I don't remember any of that. She's like, no, the time I was talking about, we were again at my grandmother's house, not across the street, but the yard on the side, the neighbor's house. We were out on her farmer's porch looking over the yard, and this red light came into the sky and started making figure eights in the sky. It was almost like it was a set performance. I had forgotten about that until she mentioned it. I believe we're closer to 8 or 9 when this happened, so it's not the incident we grew up talking about, but there's some overlap in argument there on that. So then that yard we were talking about was actually family land, and we would move right into the lion's den of a hub of a lot of my UFO activity. One of the first things that started happening when we lived there was an ongoing nightmare of arms coming through the walls. The other thing that would happen, not every day, but several times a week, and this went on for a couple weeks at least, a ball of white light would come in through the window. Once it got into the room, I would see shadowy figures. It was almost like smoke within a shadow. There's movement within the shadow, but I couldn't see any details. I don't think that's really how they were. I think that's just my mind processing it. At first, there were always 2, what I perceived to be males just by their energy signal, and they were always right by the bed. They were very militaristic, and not so much in a mean or aggressive way, but very strict. You have to learn this stuff. There's also a small male child that was at the foot of the bed, and they were kind of almost teaching us together to compare and that sort of thing. And there was also a female entity that would often pace in the corner of the room. She became almost a motherly figure. She wanted more of the interaction. She didn't like this setup. Like I said, this went on for multiple times a week for multiple weeks. The only real thing I remember of any of these lessons was once I was allowed to get on the floor and sit with the little boy, and I asked him what he was. And he just projected this image of Rosie the robot from the Jetsons into my head. And he didn't physically laugh, but we both emotionally shared the emotion of laughter. The only other thing I remember is a female once presenting me what looked like an arrowhead or a spear tip made out of crystal or glass. And she said, "This is the key." I don't know if that's metaphorical, a physical thing. I've never tried to make sense of it. It's just, that's what I know of it. So behind the house, in the woods, behind my grandmother's and stuff, we were out there all the time. I've been in the woods pretty much my whole life, and we knew all the trails and the clearings and stuff. But sometimes when we go walking out there, there would be clearings that aren't there would happen. We've had moments of frozen time where my grandmother and other cousins would just be stuck in a frozen position as me and my cousin who was with me on that first encounter would be led off into one of these clearings that didn't exist. Sometimes in these clearings, I would be visited by a little white fawn. It had the energy signature of the female. So if the other part of it was education or schooling, this seemed more like recess. This was her way to connect. So the last time I saw them, and the first time I actually got to really see them, I was looking down at my back stairs, confused. I was in the air and didn't know why I was above the stairs. So obviously I kind of look around to try to get my bearings. And the first thing I see is this just white cloth with blood on it. I soon realized that the blood is mine. It's coming from my nose. It's the female entity carrying me down. We got back into the house. I don't remember going into the house, but when we got in the house, it was her and the two males. Usually they were in control of everything. They knew the next step before it happened. This time they were almost frantic. They were pacing around, but this is the first time I could actually see them. They kind of looked like your typical gray you hear about, but they were kind of a little more rounded, a little more softer and porcelainy, with, you know, a bluish purple kind of hue tint to them. And my impression of the situation is that they stepped in and took me out of an abduction situation that wasn't supposed to happen. And that was the last time I saw them, and that's when the schooling ended. Next, we'd move up to Farmington, New Hampshire. And our bedroom was on the second floor. And we had this bookshelf in the corner next to the window, and with a lamp on it. And because we're boys, me and my brother, not very bright, we used to take crayons as a pastime and melt them on the lamp. So I was standing there doing that one day, and oh, that's the actual lamp. It was. So I was standing there doing that. The window's like right here, and this giant image of this alien face shows up in the window. So its face is here, my face is here, and this is some sort of projection because this is a second floor, you know, room. As I'm staring at it, it's staring at me. The next thing I know, a blue jay flies through it and crashes into the window. Some of you who know me and have seen it in action, I have extreme phobia of birds now. I cannot be near them, which somebody likes to rub in my face. This was close to the high school. We had just all graduated, and we were going down to UNH for the night for some activities. So we were driving down the road, and we got to this little swampy area, and I saw just this hint of something in the sky. So I pulled over. I was driving. I had two friends with me, one in the front seat, one in the back, to get out and look at this thing. So we get out to see it, and we're looking, we don't see anything, and it finally just gets close enough to the lamppost that we can just see the little reflection of something shiny, a little like corner of the craft. And I pointed up to it and went, there it is. And as soon as I did that, the next thing I remember, we were all back inside the car. Except now my two passengers are in the back seat, huddled and scared. I get this image of an extraterrestrial right there in my face. And I couldn't really look at him. It was, I remember kind of almost staring at the ashtray more than anything else. And it showed me this image of a broken beer bottle. The next thing I know, we all get out of the car. We go outside, and there's a broken beer bottle between the tire and the curb. We decide that's what we saw, that's what we pulled over for, and went on our merry way and never discussed it again. And this is just one example. Sometimes they use stuff in your environment or your memory to put false images in your head. I was with my brother in a rural part of the state, looking at a piece of property. We had seen quite a few regular deer, and I'll get to that in a moment, along the way. They were fresh in our memory. We had just seen one right before we started walking down the driveway to check out this property. As we started to walk down the driveway, I got this image of what looked like a pixelated smiley face, but it was more brown. So I instantly just reached out and put my hand on my brother's chest and stopped him. And the next thing you know, this massive white tail comes walking through the property. When I mean massive, I'm not talking like 300 pounds. This thing was the size of a moose. Although moose and deer are pretty similar, they're not compatible. You will not get a white tail to weigh 1,000 pounds. And I could probably do a whole lecture just on some of the weird animal encounters I've had, but we'll just throw in another one. I was having a bunch of sightings, like within a week, and the way the house was set up at the time, there was a little screen porch where I'd go out, have my coffee, put on my boots for work, and have a cigarette. And I was doing that one morning, and I just looked out towards the street, and there was this animal that was small and white with these big black eyes. It had the body of like a mink or a weasel from the top half, and then it just kind of got fat like a cat or a raccoon with a fluffier tail at the end. And it was looking at me, I was looking at it, and I said, I don't know what you are, but you're freaking me out. And then it, with some understanding, just got up and walked off. And I was like, should I said something else? So we lived in the same town, like really close to one apartment to the next. The kids were getting bigger, we needed an extra bedroom and that sort of thing. The landlord had one opened up, so we moved right down the street from where we were staying. I got up in the middle of the night. My wife at the time saw me get up and get dressed. And I walked to the other house in the middle of the night. At this point, and these guys can verify too, being an experiencer and having these things is tough on relationships. You're going through a lot, and our relationship was not good at that point. And there's no way I would have got up in the middle of the night, got dressed, and walked out without hearing an earful. So anyways, I walked over to the other house, and I was just standing there, kind of on one corner. And I ended up walking kind of down closer to the front door into the front yard. And when I did, I saw this big basketball-sized white light. As soon as I recognized it, it started coming at me rapidly and raising. Even though this is what I saw first, right before it got to my head, I pictured it as a big dog. My mind went, oh no, there's a big dog. So I turned and shouldered it and waited for the impact. After what I thought was the appropriate amount of time and not feeling an impact, I opened my eyes to kind of see what was going on and found myself about 15 feet in the air, surrounded in blue light. So I was tipping somewhere. I don't really remember how we got there, but I was being escorted on this landscape. It was all sandy, and it was pretty blank except for these little bunkers that you could, little square bunkers kind of on the side of me. I was walked up to a certain spot, and I was made to dig in the soil, and it was kind of like when it snows and you get that little bit of moisture and you get that crunchy layer on top, and then it's kind of powdery under it. It was like that, and I had to keep digging in it. It was very soft and very fine, and it would keep filling in as quick as I could dig it. So after this experiment, whatever you want to call it, I was standing there, And again, this large image of a being appeared on the horizon. It started sharing with me scenes of earthly destructions, natural disasters. The ocean was a big part of it, and all that. So after that, I was brought home and had some guys who kind of looked like this, about 5 feet tall, escorting me up the driveway, one on each shoulder. Usually when they talk to you, you hear it telepathically. You don't usually hear them talk to each other. So they're walking me up the driveway, and I hear one, not out loud, again telepathically, say to the other one, "Don't let him turn around." When you hear that in any situation, your first instinct is to turn around. So when I turned around, there was this large 6 to 7 foot black creature kind of peering out from behind a tree. Got in the house without incident. I can't tell you what to make of any of it or what happened between them, but and as these guys are saying, you know, they're not perfect, they do make mistakes. Well, and sometimes they're just jerks. I was out camping, this would be not this April, but the April before, and something came and took me from my campsite. I was sitting at the fire, I was done for the day, all my camp chores were done, camp was set up, and I was just, you know, relaxing. Next thing I know, I am in the middle of the woods somewhere where I do not know where I am. I do not know how I got there. So I saw a little log up ahead, and I figured, all right, I'll walk up there, sit down, and clear my head. So as I approached the log, I realized there was a clearing up ahead of me. In this clearing, there were 5 panels that looked like black mirrored glass. At first I thought I was looking at like an industrial building. The panels are each like double the size of a piece of plywood, so probably like 8 by 16 each. And they were just there. So I decided, nope, that's not the direction I want to go. So I walked away from that, but I had no idea where I was. Or where it even began. I knew if I was anywhere close to where I started, I should have been on a little peninsula of land and have water on 3 sides of me. So I decided I was just going to try to pick a direction and walk and hope I hit water, put my back up against the tree for the night, and figure it out in the morning. I walked probably 45 minutes in the dark, no lighter, no nothing, no flashlight, no idea where I am until I finally hit water. So I navigated down the coast for a little bit because I still didn't really want to be out there. And as I was walking down the coast, I came across a Mylar balloon that I'd seen earlier in the day, like a helium balloon that said "Happy Birthday" on it. It washed up on the shore but I don't know if it was just there as a marker or if it has any significance, but yeah, so they didn't bring me back that night. We've had a lot of experiences out camping. And here's where it kind of gets hard, I think, for all of us, is when it's just you, it's hard enough. When it starts affecting those around you, it becomes real on a real different level real quick. So I used the owl in the other slide. My daughter was camping with me. Same lake, different location, and she had a almost very similar experience. We're in a little remote site you had to hike into, and she didn't get service down there, so her and her friend who was with us, they wanted to walk out, go to the bathroom, and check their phones and do all that stuff. And they went out to do that, and as they were coming down the trail, they heard an owl, and the next thing they know, they were across the campground, through the woods, scrambling over granite boulders and stuff in the dark. luckily she's been in that campground since she could walk, probably before, and once she got to something recognizable, knew how to get back. But yeah, I don't know if that's going to be too late, or yeah, probably that. Girlfriend at the time, the same campsite. I don't know why I keep going there. Ended up with a mark on her leg. It was kind of almost like a bigger bruise with an injection site, some bruising with little dots in there. I don't know whether you can see that. So again, it starts affecting the people around you. With this one in particular, this would have been in September, because the next month we had another conference and we were meeting up with some other paranormal friends of ours who are also experiencers, and the female part of that couple had the same mark in the same spot from about the same time. And yeah, this is just, you guys can jump in at any time now too. It's just, this is the effect it has on people. This is a real thing. It's not, my big thing is it's not just a story. I don't care if you believe me or not. Like Matt said, the trauma's there, the trauma's real. And that's what all three of us, work with to help people get through.
Now, we've had a number of people that have come to us, and we were talking about this last night. A lot of times, the experiencer that we're helping, we understand them. We can help them move along. We understand the patterns. But the people that we usually wind up helping the most is the significant other that generally is not taken. I'll relate one particular case quickly. There was a woman that would be regularly taken, and her husband was a former special forces guy. He was also a state police officer. This guy was like 6 foot something, 200, somebody you don't want to tangle with, basically. Very highly trained, knows what to do if there's a situation. They would come and take her, and they would immobilize him. And this played with this guy's psyche immensely, because here I am, I'm trained to be the biggest badass on the planet, and they shut me off like a light switch, and I'm forced to watch what they do to her. So we wound up talking to him, letting him know, okay, you've been in combat. You've watched some of your friends further out and they get shelled. You can't do anything about it. You're in this position, they're there. And the ones that survive, what do? You help them to their thing. Basically, we just let him be there for her. Never mind what happens to you, be there for her. And he latched onto that. It's like, okay, I know there's nothing I can do what they do to me. I got to be the strong one for her. And that gave him more of an outlet and a purpose in that experience. That's got to be one of the hardest things to do, watching your loved one go through something and not be able to do anything about it. What would you do if it was your kids? You're watching something happen to your kids. The worst thing in the world to go up against is a mother trying to protect her kids. It doesn't matter the species. Same thing, a guy trying to protect his wife or his kids. That's, human nature. You want to try and protect. And the helpless feeling that these people have is real. That's a real trauma. And that's what we try and do. We try and help them move beyond it, give them coping mechanisms to deal with it. We work with licensed psychotherapists and psychologists and things like that. But nobody can help somebody else like somebody else that's been through the same experience. You can have as many pieces of paper after your name, but if you haven't been through that experience, you're only there as an observer to it. We've been there. We've been in those trenches, so we understand.
and
You guys are too tall. And another thing of this, when it happens, it's so traumatic. The fight or flight is going off, and you can't do either one. Your body, your mind just has a way of coping. With me, couldn't fight, couldn't flight, I developed my sense of humor. And every time I get taken, my sense of humor will take over. And if it doesn't amuse them, hey, it keeps me going. It keeps me laughing, you know? It's a way I've coped with it. I've been to therapists and doctors, and you mention this shit to them. They look at you and say, all right, here's a prescription. You're crazy pretty much. Here you go. And I'm sitting there, I wish I was crazy. There's meds that fix crazy. There's no meds to fix this. So I found that laughter is the best medicine. It raises your frequencies. It's a defense mechanism that I've developed. I don't know, when you're trapped and there's nowhere to go and you don't have any control, your mind does silly things.
And that's another thing that we deal with. We also wind up having to bring people to alcohol counselors, drug counselors, because they're seeking shelter. Alcohol and drugs are, not a real shelter. It's a sham. But it's something, and that's what they'll gravitate to. First thing we have to do is stop the bad behavior. Get them on a sober plane if we can, and then try and help with the trauma that's happened. First, you got to be able to acknowledge that it's happening. Then from there, you can learn to basically learn how to cope with it. There are many different ways to learn to heal. Different ways for different people. Many different people, many different ways. What works for one may not necessarily work for the other. It's a matter of finding out what type of person is this. Okay, this person is more this type. This type of outlet may be more beneficial than this one.
How much time we got left?
5 minutes.
Yes.
Question?
Yeah, I guess at this point we have 5 minutes left. I will take questions. If we can't get to you all, we apologize, but we have to stay on schedule today because the radio show is live. We cannot move that time around. Al.
God bless you guys. Why on earth did you go to the woods alone?
He's never alone. What are you talking about?
Is it to extricate yourself from your family, protect you them, or anyone can check you on TV? Can you tell me why I read you on Facebook? He's up there in the woods.
Oh, yeah. For me, along with the sense of humor, I think we all have probably a very disturbed sense of humor at this point. But for me, it's a coping mechanism to get away from it all. I try to pretend it doesn't exist out there, where here, in this more setting or, everyday life, there's always something to trigger a memory or something like that. Out there, it's kind of more peaceful for me. So for me, it's more of a coping mechanism.
Thank you.
Do you have any idea what their criteria is on who they choose, and is there any common denominator between you all?
Not that we've found yet. I mean, they took anybody. It's not a stereotypical person. They can take anybody. It doesn't matter what you do. What profession you're in, male, female, doesn't matter. Religion doesn't matter. They don't care. They're not picky. I don't know what I would like to know why they choose people. Go ahead. No?
Well, some of the studies that have done have shown, preferences for certain types of physical things in a body, like Rh factors or certain things in genetic makeups, but it isn't universal. It isn't. There's no one specific thing that we all share.
We have found that they do follow like bloodlines. A lot of experiencers. We're not the only one. Like my mom, like my parents. It's down the family tree. A lot of experiencers have family members. Even if they don't know about it, once they come out, then they'll find out. It's part of what we do. Speak out. People always ask me, it's so hard to, talk about your experiences, people looking at you, but we do what we do. People might look at us like we're crazy, but we're going to affect all the people out there that are too scared to talk because everybody's going to think they're crazy. And then they'll come forward, and the wave just, it's a chain reaction. It's a beautiful thing.
Back there.
My question is, like, the direction that people have taken, I imagine varies, but, you know, like you were talking, you were explaining that everything, and is it, the time is that, like, 10 minutes is our time, is that a different duration time? But, you know, the time stands still while you, is like 10 minutes?
It's different. Yeah.
Good question. Yeah, your perception of time as things are happening are distorted. And so that may also relate to Ben and Paulino's talk about, you know, time storms and things like that. Your perception as it's happening is disjointed. What's happening is, best way to describe it, it's stuttered in time. You're getting bits and pieces, you know, kind of like as a strobe light goes as your image of what's going on and happening. The average abduction, if you're to look through the literature, is between an hour and a half to 3 hours. The average being about 2.5.
Not that I know of or recall. I really don't have a lot of recall of a lot of stuff. I get more beginnings and endings and not so much middles. You know, something we all struggle with, trying to remember the details of what we're supposed to do. A lot of us feel that this isn't an accident. We weren't in the wrong place at the wrong time for whatever reason our bloodline was chosen or why it got passed to us. We don't know, but we feel it's with a purpose, and that, you know, we've got to do something about it.
A lot of us are given visions by the ETs of apocalyptic events. I myself was shown, it was like I was right there, volcanoes going off. It was very scary, very traumatic. And when they speak, the telepathy is not only hearing voices, but it's also portraying pictures in your mind. It's like a movie play, like remote viewing kind of thing. So they speak with pictures a lot. And it's like they can bring you right into a situation. The sense that I got was if we don't wake up and start changing our ways, we're not going to make it. This is a land of free will, and I always ask, why don't you, just tell us what to do? We can't. This is free will. You have choice. You can pick but both choices, you can make a bad choice and a good choice. They're all going to lead to the same destination if you want to take the rocky road. So they also told me that love is the answer. It's the answer. It's the healing. They don't like the way that we are such a warrior species. We're attacking each other, for God's sakes. They don't understand why we're, pitting everything against each other, and why anybody would go to war to kill absolute strangers just because somebody said, go do it. They're very concerned about our well-being. But like I said, this is free will. They can suggest and they can leave clues, but they cannot tell you what to do. They can't make you do something. It's free will.
I have a question about, you said something about a key in one of your visions that was stone. Was there anything more specific to that? You didn't say it was the stone, but it was the key.
Yeah, what I remember is what I remember. It was more like a clear crystal or something, but we are unfortunately out of time, but we'll be around if people have questions. We're sorry if we didn't get to you, and we'll welcome Mr. Peter Robbins back to the stage.